The corn was screaming, or maybe that was Elijah. He couldn't hear his own breath anymore. Just the blood crashing in his ears, the pounding of his sneakers against damp soil, and the relentless sound behind him. That sound, a whistle, sweet and slow, a child's lullaby warped through rusted teeth, 3 soft notes rising, falling, rising again. It danced on the wind and slithered through the stalks like a snake with no skin. Elijah didn't look back. He couldn't. Everyone who did, gone. Don't look back. That was the only rule, the only truth he remembered from his grandma's cracked lips and clouded eyes. But his legs were failing him. The corn stalks towered above like watchers, scraping at his arms, pulling at his hoodie. He pushed forward blindly, crashing through a row, then another, not caring anymore which way was out. There was no out. A low branch slashed across his cheek. He tasted blood. The whistle came again. Closer. He dared a glance to the side. A shape moved parallel to him, tall, thin, gliding between rows, no footsteps, just motion. Just watching. He turned and bolted harder, breath hitching in sobs now, each inhale like knives. Somewhere just beyond the field, there was safety. Mason was waiting at the farmhouse. He promised. They made a pact hours ago, swearing over soda cans and comic books in Mason's room. If the Whistler ever comes, we run to the farmhouse, always the farmhouse. It was the last place their friend Luke had been seen before he vanished last summer. A branch snapped behind him, then another, then nothing. Elijah stumbled into a clearing. Moonlight spilled across a wide, empty patch of land like a wound in the corn, and there, across the clearing, stood the farmhouse. Its windows were dark, lifeless squares, but the porch light was on. Relief broke over him like a wave. He let out a broken laugh, sprinted up the porch steps 2 at a time, and slammed his fist against the door. "Mason," he cried, tears mixing with blood on his face. "Open the door." No answer. He pounded again, harder. The porch creaked behind him. His fist froze mid-knock. He turned slowly, heart thudding so violently he thought it might rupture. Nothing, no one. Just the field, still, quiet, breathless. The whistle had stopped. His trembling hand gripped the doorknob. It turned. "Mason?" he whispered, stepping inside. The farmhouse smelled of rot and cold earth. The overhead lights were off, but moonlight spilled in from the kitchen window, painting the hallway in long, thin shadows. "Mason?" His voice cracked. He took another step. Then he saw it. Dark streaks trailing along the floorboards, leading into the hallway. Blood. Fresh. Elijah's foot hovered, his breath stilled. He stepped forward anyway, pulled by some sick part of his brain that needed to see, needed to know. The hallway groaned under his weight. The blood led toward Mason's room. The door was ajar. He reached it with a shaking hand and pushed it open slowly. Empty. The window was wide open. Curtains fluttered gently, billowing like lungs exhaling their last breath. But Mason was gone. All that remained was his sketchbook on the bed, open, fresh ink on the page. Elijah blinked at the drawing. It was a man. No, something that resembled a man. Tall, boneless limbs, a hollow oval where the face should be, and a long black mouth whistling a sound Elijah could somehow hear in his head just looking at it. His heart seized. Then, behind him, whistling. Soft, warm, inside the room. He turned. Nothing, only the curtain waving lazily. He stepped back, turned again, ready to flee. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Another step. He tripped, hit the floor hard. Everything went black. The farmhouse was still. Sheriff Adler stood on the porch, boots soaked in dew, staring at the front door. "There was blood," the deputy said behind him, voice hushed, but no sign of a struggle. No broken glass, no fingerprints, just that. He pointed. On the inside wall, carved deep into the wood paneling with what looked like a rusted nail, were 4 jagged words. "You heard me." Sheriff Adler didn't respond. He removed his hat and looked up toward the cornfield. A breeze passed through, and on that breeze, a faint whistle. He turned toward the sound and smiled. The first thing Mason noticed was that the sky over Harper's Hill looked wrong. Gray clouds sagged low over the fields, thick and heavy, like something pressing down on the world. The light was drained of color, as if the sun had turned its face away from the town. Elijah was gone. They all felt it. Mason hadn't slept. His sketchbook sat unopened at the edge of his bed, untouched since the night before. He didn't remember drawing the thing inside, the faceless man, the long black mouth. But it was his handwriting beneath the image. Don't listen too closely. His hands still shook as he walked the gravel road to meet Harper and Jesse at the old quarry overlook, their secret place since they were 12. Sadie arrived late. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and her fingers were streaked with dirt. She didn't offer an explanation. They sat in a circle, backs to the trees. The town below them looked like a postcard, but they all knew it was rotting underneath. No one spoke for a long time. Harper broke the silence. "They're calling it a runaway again." "Like they did with Luke," Jesse muttered, "and Sarah and Liam before that. All of them ran away." He pulled a flask from his jacket and took a quick swig. Harper opened her journal. She flipped to a fresh page and began writing furiously. She always documented things, feelings, facts, rumors. Every disappearance, every sighting, every strange occurrence in Harper's Hill for the past decade. She had records no one else cared to keep. Sadie finally looked up. "I dreamed about him." "Elijah?" Mason asked. "No," her voice trembled. "The Whistler." Jesse rolled his eyes. "Come on." "I was in the woods. It was dark. There was this shape. It didn't walk. It slid, like it wasn't touching the ground. And it was whistling." She shivered. "Same tune I heard the night Elijah disappeared. When I looked at it, I couldn't move." They all went quiet. The wind picked up. The trees creaked above them. "I heard it too," Mason said at last. Outside the farmhouse. They turned to him. "I found Elijah's phone in the field about 20 feet from the porch. I didn't tell the sheriff." Mason reached into his coat and handed it to Harper. The screen was cracked. There were 3 voicemails. The last one was time-stamped at 12:03 a.m. She pressed play. At first, nothing, then breathing erratic, panicked. "Elijah," Mason whispered. A rustling sound, heavy footsteps, a hiss of wind, then, faint and chilling, 3 notes. A whistle, sweet, almost playful. The recording cut off with a wet sound, something like a choke or a gasp dragged backward. No one spoke for a long time. Harper stood suddenly, flipping through her journal. "There's something else." She held it open to a page from last fall. The last time someone disappeared, the night Luke vanished, there was a symbol carved into the church door the next morning. Jesse squinted at the page. "What is that? A tuning fork?" "Looks like a trident," Mason muttered. Sadie stepped forward, pale. "It's on my window." Everyone stared. "In my room this morning. It wasn't there last night." Without another word, they rushed back to town, riding their bikes through dead streets. Windows were shuttered, doors locked, no children played. It was like the town had turned in on itself, curling into a ball of silence. At Sadie's house, her bedroom window faced the woods. The glass was cold to the touch, and there, etched into the frost, was the symbol, 3 vertical slashes. Beneath it, faint but unmistakable, were 4 words. "You heard me too." Jessie backed away. "What the hell is happening?" Harper scanned the room. Her eyes landed on the closet. "Did you open this today?" she asked Sadie. Sadie shook her head. "No." Harper stepped forward and slowly pulled it open. The smell hit first. Damp earth, mildew, something that had been buried too long. On the floor inside was a small wooden box, old and worn. Burned into the lid was the same symbol. Inside, 12 teeth, human, and a scrap of paper. Harper unfolded it with trembling fingers. A child's handwriting, 4 words. "Whistle back to stay." The 4 gathered again, this time in the abandoned school basement. Jessie had found a broken key and bribed the janitor for access. They stepped over moldy books, peeled plaster, and rusted lockers. Harper brought the box. Sadie held a candle. Mason carried his sketchbook. The air was still, dead. In the far corner of the basement was an old filing cabinet. Inside, they found school records from the 1940s, before the building caught fire. Several pages were blackened and unreadable, but Harper found one marked Harper's Hill Music Program. She read aloud. "Special thanks to Father Merrill for his donation of the Whistler's tune. As agreed, it will only be played during the Festival of Offering." "What's the Festival of Offering?" Sadie asked, voice hushed. But Mason wasn't listening. He was flipping his sketchbook. Every page, every sketch, was now filled with images of the same figure, standing behind trees, outside windows, behind them. In one drawing, Elijah stood with his back turned. Behind him, the whistler, its head bent low, and it was holding something. A tooth. They didn't speak on the walk back from the school basement. Not at first. The weight of the box, the sketches, the note in Elijah's handwriting, it all pressed down like wet concrete on their backs. The wind had picked up again, that same low, breathy howl that slithered through trees and chimneys like something whispering secrets just out of reach. Mason stopped first. "We can't keep doing this in the dark," he said, voice hard. "We need to talk to someone. The sheriff or the mayor. Somebody has to know what that symbol means." "No," Harper snapped, rounding on him. "We go to the adults and we lose everything. They'll cover it up like they always do, like they did with Luke, with Sarah." Jessie stepped forward, mouth tight. "So what? We just keep playing detective while people get picked off one by one?" "We're not just playing," Harper said. "We're the only ones actually doing something." Sadie stood off to the side, clutching her coat closed. Her eyes darted between them. "It's watching us all the time now. I can feel it, like it's waiting for us to split." Mason turned to her. "Why didn't you tell us about the dream sooner, Sadie? Or that the symbol was in your room?" She started but faltered. "I thought it would go away if I ignored it. I thought it was just in my head." "That's how it works," Harper said quietly. "It gets in, little by little, makes you doubt yourself." "Or makes you hide things," Jessie muttered. The group stilled. Harper's head snapped toward him. "What's that supposed to mean?" Jessie shrugged, but his expression was sharp, accusing. "You've got a journal full of town secrets. Old symbols, death dates, every time the whistler was heard. Convenient how much you know." She stared at him, stunned. Sadie looked between them, panicked. "Don't do this." But Mason didn't step in. He looked at Harper too, brows drawn low. "Where did you get that music program file, Harper? The one from 1943? You didn't show us where you found it." Harper's voice rose slightly. "You think I'm working with it?" No one answered. Wind rattled a nearby gutter. For a moment, it sounded like something dragging nails down the side of the building. "I've been keeping records since I was 10, Harper said, her voice shaking, because no one else would. Because I watched my brother disappear. Because I remember what my grandmother whispered the night before she died. If you hear the tune, don't turn your head, just pray, it moves on." The others fell silent. Sadie stepped forward. "We're turning on each other, and that's exactly what it wants. The more scared we get, the closer it gets. I think that's how it works. Fear feeds it." Harper sat down on the porch steps, burying her face in her hands. "It already has Elijah, and I think it's not done." Mason hesitated, then sat beside her. "We're not saying it's you, we're just scared. All of us, and we're getting too close to something that's been buried a long time." Sadie looked up toward the woods. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Do you think it's someone in the town, feeding it?" The silence that followed was colder than the wind. Jessie lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. "All I know is someone's lying, maybe more than one person." Then, the candle Sadie had brought, left sitting on the porch railing, flickered and blew out. No breeze, just darkness. From the trees, 3 notes. Low, rising, falling. A whistle. The next morning, Harper was waiting on the curb before sunrise. She didn't sleep. None of them had. Her eyes were red, her notebook clutched tight against her chest. Jessie arrived first, unusually quiet. Sadie followed, looking pale, her movements jerky, like she hadn't left her room all night. Mason brought the shovel. They didn't need to speak. Harper had scrawled the directions in her journal from a story her grandmother once told, a place hidden beneath the old church. A foundation older than Harper's Hill itself. They biked through a town frozen in time, shutters still closed, the air unnaturally still, as if everyone was waiting for something to pass. The old church sat on the hill like a sentinel, white paint peeled down to gray bones. It hadn't hosted a sermon in decades, not since Father Merrill was found hanging behind the altar in 1956. His eyes, the story went, were sewn shut with twine. As Mason forced the rusted side door open, Harper paused. "Remember this part," she whispered. "This is where the town started hiding things." Inside, the church was suffocatingly quiet. Dust motes hung like suspended ash. They moved quickly, up the broken pulpit steps, then down into the basement through a trap door behind the altar. There, behind a wall of rotting hymnals and blackened hymn books, they found a sealed door made of stone, built into the earth itself. A symbol, the same trident-like marking, was carved across its surface. "Help me," Mason said, and together they pried it open. The air that escaped was like a held breath exhaling, damp, foul, old. Inside was a narrow corridor leading to a crypt carved from bedrock. The walls were lined with skulls and bones, arranged in spirals and patterns. Some had small pieces of parchment tied to their jaws. Written prayers. One said, "Keep him whistling away." Sadie whimpered softly. "This isn't a crypt. It's a vault," Harper said. "A prison." At the far end of the chamber sat a massive stone bookstand. On it rested a brittle, oversized ledger, its pages sealed in wax. On the wall behind it, carved in perfect symmetry, were 4 figures in robes and something standing above them. The Whistler, armless, mouth wide, its head a mass of thorns. Mason cracked open the book. Wax flakes crumbled to the floor. Inside were lists, names, dozens, then hundreds. Harper read the top. Citizens of Harper's Hill who owed tithe. Next to each name was a year and a mark, paid or taken. Jessie pointed to a name near the top of the first page, Merrill Thomas, taken. Harper's hands trembled. The church founded this town not to protect it, but to feed it. Sadie's voice came out hollow. Why would anyone help something like that? Mason turned another page, and the ink seemed fresher. The last 5 entries were new. Their names: Mason, Harper, Sadie, Jessie, and Elijah. Taken. Jessie stepped back, panic blooming in his eyes. Someone's still keeping the book. They bolted from the vault. Jessie slammed the trap door shut behind them, and they burst into the sunlight, gasping as if surfacing from water that had been holding them under. Someone's still making offerings, Harper said, still marking people. Who? Sadie asked. The mayor? The sheriff? Jessie shook his head. No, it's gotta be someone closer, someone who knows who we are. The church bell, silent for decades, tolled once, low, gruff. They all froze. Mason turned toward the bell tower. A figure stood in the window, tall, watching. Gone. The 4 met in Harper's backyard, fireflies flickering like sparks across the grass. Jessie didn't speak much. Sadie kept fidgeting. Mason drew in silence, more frantic now, shapes overlapping shapes. Harper stared at the sky. It's someone close to us. We'd know, Sadie insisted. Harper turned to her. Would we? You said your grandma used to hum strange songs. Did you ever ask her where she learned them? She's dead, Harper. And Jessie, your uncle runs the town records, right? How much does he know? How much has he hidden? Don't go there, Jessie said coldly. Mason interrupted. My mom used to lock the windows at night, even in the summer. Said there were things that followed the tune. I thought it was just superstition. No one ever leaves this place, Harper whispered. They die or disappear, or they stay and pretend they don't hear it. The whistle came again. Faint, distant, but this time, it wasn't from the woods. It was from across the street. They ran to the window. Someone stood in Mrs. Greaves's yard, the elderly librarian who brought Harper old books, who gave Mason his first sketchbook, who had looked after Elijah when his parents died. She was standing still. Too still. And she was whistling the tune. Mason gasped. No, she wouldn't. But Harper's voice cut in, flat and cold. She's the keeper. They waited until morning. Not out of fear, but because you don't confront the dead in the dark. That's what Sadie said, voice trembling, eyes sunken. That's what her mother once whispered before locking all the doors on Halloween night. So they waited, and when the sun broke through the clouds like a warning light, they crossed the street and knocked on Mrs. Greaves's door. She answered before they even touched it. I was wondering when you'd come, she said softly, not surprised. The house was warm. Too warm. Cinnamon and lavender filled the air like a thick fog. Her walls were lined with books, most of them old, cracked, and written in languages none of them recognized. Jessie lingered by the door, jaw set. Harper stood tall. Sadie looked like she was going to cry. Mrs. Greaves didn't look like a monster. She wore her blue cardigan, her silver hair pinned in a loose bun, and offered tea like always. Sit, she said, and they did, like children being told a bedtime story. She began with a name. Asher Greaves, her great-grandfather, the first keeper of the Whistler. He was a reverend, she said, but not for Christ. For something older, something beneath. Her voice didn't tremble. The land this town sits on, it isn't dead. It remembers, it hears. She opened a wooden box on the table. Inside was a whistle, carved from blackened bone. She didn't touch it. Harper's Hill was never meant to thrive. It was meant to endure. Every few decades the whistler stirs, and to keep it from swallowing the whole town, we offer guidance, a selection, a tithe. Jessie shot up. You kill people. No, Mrs. Greaves said, staring into her tea. The whistler chooses. We only mark. The sound, it seeks out fear. It follows the broken. Mason's voice was a raw whisper. Why Elijah? Because he saw it first, she said, and once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You belong to it. You carry it inside. Sadie shook her head, tears spilling. You watched him grow up. You made him cookies. Mrs. Greaves's eyes glistened. I loved him. That's why I marked him early. It's painless. When you go willingly. Harper's fists clenched. You're sick. No, the old woman said. I'm merciful. She rose and crossed the room, pulled a thick leather-bound book from her shelf and dropped it onto the table. It fell open to a page filled with new names. Mason, Harper, Jessie, Sadie. Beneath them, in faded ink, one more name had been added. Greaves, Elena, taken. Sadie's voice cracked. You're offering yourself? Mrs. Greaves nodded. The whistler always takes 4, sometimes 5. But this time I've made it 5 from the start. One of you will be spared. They sat frozen. She smiled, gently, sadly. You should leave now and lock your windows tonight. They didn't speak as they left. The weight of her words crushed any protest before it could form. Back in Harper's garage, they sat in a circle again, but the space between them felt cavernous. Jessie finally spoke. She marked us. I don't think it's just her, Mason muttered. She said there have been keepers before her. There might be more now. Sadie stood, pacing. One of us gets out, that's what she said. She knows who. We're being picked off like a game. Harper stared at the floor. Unless we end it. Mason looked up. How? She opened her notebook again, flipped to a ripped page, copied from the vault under the church. To end the tune, silence the source, bury the bone in Whistler's mouth. She pointed at the black whistle Mrs. Greaves had shown them. That whistle isn't just symbolic, Harper said. It's real. It's his. The first keeper took it from the creature when it first emerged. We take it back to where the whistler came from. The woods, the cave, the place Sadie dreamed about. And we end it. Sadie's eyes widened. You want to go to it? No, Harper said. I want to bury its voice. They all looked at one another, fear, doubt, and something else. Resolve. We're not letting it choose, Jessie said. We choose. Harper nodded, and far off in the woods, the whistler called. 3 notes, this time. It was closer than ever. The woods devoured them whole. They moved as shadows between the trees, the forest clawing at their jackets and skin. Moonlight filtered through skeletal branches like cold fingers reaching for their throats. No one spoke, no one dared. The silence was deeper now, heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Harper led the way, her boots sinking into the damp earth. Mason followed close behind, his hands twitching, his eyes bloodshot. Sadie clutched the black whistle in her coat pocket. It pulsed like a heartbeat against her palm. Jessie brought up the rear, glancing behind them every few seconds, as if expecting the trees to move. They descended into Forsaken Hollow just after midnight. It was worse than they had imagined. The trees here were rotted and black, twisted into shapes that resembled grasping hands. Nothing stirred, not even insects. The air was thick with the stench of decay and old blood. In the center of the hollow lay the cave mouth, collapsed years ago by the town founders, now nothing more than a pile of ancient stones carved with cryptic runes. "This is it," Harper whispered, barely audible. Mason stepped forward, crouching by the stones. His fingers traced the faded symbols, recognizing the ones he'd been drawing in his sleep. His lips moved silently, repeating a rhythm he didn't understand. His eyes glazed over. "He knows these," Sadie said, her voice distant. Jessie knelt beside Mason and grabbed his shoulder. "Mason, hey, come back." Mason blinked hard. The symbols under his hand crumbled like ash. The air trembled. The ground groaned. With a low, resonant hum, the stones began to sink. One by one, they dropped into the earth, revealing a black chasm that exhaled a wind of icy silence. It wasn't a hole. It was a wound. The mouth was open. No one moved. Then Harper stepped forward, pulling the crumpled page from the church vault from her bag. Her hands shook. "We have to be sure," she said. "We go in, bury it, say the words, all of them, together, no breaks, no fear." "I'm going," Sadie said. She pulled the whistle from her coat. "I took it last night. I've had it the whole time. It wants me." Jessie reached for her arm. "Then we do it together." Sadie nodded, but her eyes didn't meet his. The cave swallowed them, just like the forest. Light faded after only a few steps. The air was thick and wet, the walls pulsing like living flesh. Their flashlights flickered as they descended, footsteps echoing in unnatural ways. Harper led the chant in a shaking voice, reading from the parchment. "Silence the source, bury the bone." They repeated it again and again, but with every step deeper, Sadie slowed. Her breath hitched. The whistle vibrated in her hand. Something stirred in the dark. A low whistle, not from her, not from anyone. Mason spun in place, flashlight darting over the walls. Jessie froze. Harper's voice faltered. "Don't stop," Mason hissed. "Keep saying it." "Silence the source." The whistle stopped, and then a voice, deep, antiquated, wrong, spoke inside their minds. "It's not the bone you must bury, it's the blood." Sadie gasped. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her eyes rolled back. Jessie screamed. Mason lunged forward, grabbing the whistle from her hand as she collapsed. The darkness surged around them. "She's the host," Harper whispered, stepping back. Sadie's body jerked. Her hands twisted. Her mouth opened wide, wider than should be possible. From deep inside her throat came the whistler's song. Not a whistle now. A scream. Mason knew what had to be done. He looked to Harper. She nodded, her eyes full of tears. He shoved the whistle back into Sadie's mouth. She shrieked, the sound ripping through stone. Harper began the chant again. Jessie joined. Mason pressed Sadie down into the soil as the walls closed in. The mouth was sealing itself. The last thing they heard was Sadie's voice, clear and human again. "Thank you." Then silence. And darkness. The mouth closed. Only 3 came out. But something followed them. It was not the whistler. It was what remained. Unfinished, malformed, wearing a human memory like a skin it hadn't earned. It had no face, only a pale stretch of flesh where a mouth should be, puckered and twitching, as if it were still learning to breathe. The shadows moved differently now. Trees leaned inward, silent witnesses to the thing stalking their roots. Cold crept in behind the teens as they walked back through the woods. And just before they reached the edge of the hollow, Jessie turned back. Nothing was there, but the silence had teeth. Somewhere just beyond hearing, something began to whistle. It was a tune none of them recognized. A new song, still unfinished, still hunting. It wasn't over. It was just beginning.